I'd like to welcome everyone to the December 13th meeting of the Johnson City Regional Planning Commission. Thanks to everybody for being here, and happy holidays to you. When we have a topic that's going to be open for public comment, please wait until I open the floor for public comment. Then I'll acknowledge you. If you want to come into the podium and speak for or against the item, please come to the podium, identify yourself with your name and address, and then you'll have 3 minutes to talk. And I ask you to please stay on topic and address your comments to the commission, not to the audience and not to staff. Now call the meeting to order at 6:03. So, Commissioner Murphy, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and the invocation?
Yes, sir. Let us pray. Dear Father, we thank you on today for an opportunity to come together to conduct the business of this community. We thank you for all the participants and those who are here to make decisions as to where you have called us to go. We pray you lead us and guide us by your Holy Spirit. In Jesus' name, amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Murphy. We've got the agenda. I think if you picked up an agenda that was in the back of the room, I've asked the commissioners if there's any question about the agenda or if there's any purpose for adding or any items to staff, or if we need to rearrange the order of the agenda. Anybody got any comments?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All right, we have a motion to approve and a second. Nicole, would you please call the roll on the agenda?
Commissioner Aldridge,
Yes.
Commissioner Bailey,
Yes.
Commissioner Lockmiller,
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy,
Yes.
Commissioner Oceanbine,
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Whitfield,
Yes.
Chairman Dagenhart.
Yes.
Motion is carried.
Okay, we've got the minutes of the meeting that was held on November 8th, our regularly scheduled meeting minutes. Does anybody have any changes or corrections to add to those minutes?
Motion to approve.
Second?
All right, we have a motion to approve in a second. I don't know why I had the roll called on the agenda, so we don't
It's
need to do
okay.
that. Let's just do an aye or a yay. Is everyone in favor of approving the minutes as submitted? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? They're approved. Thank you. All right, we have a consent agenda item. It's a final plat for the Charles Poore estate property. Does anybody on the commission have any questions or any issues if they want to bring that off the consent agenda?
I don't know who's presenting this from staff. I was trying to go through the map earlier, and I was just having a hard time zooming in and seeing exactly what they're talking about as far as the subdivisions.
So we'd like to go ahead and look at the map.
If you guys don't mind, just show us the. I just wanted to see you, see your eloquence in action.
But it's a 5-lot subdivision plat that was defined by the lots were defined in a legal will for deceased. The lots, and we'll look at the plat, we'll go back to the previous slide and look at the plat. This is West Mountain View Road, this is Hanover. Sam's would be over here. This is the Roundtree subdivision with Millbrook Drive with a stub here and a stub here for Millbrook Drive. Property zoned R2. These are the lots. You see this one lot, it fronts on West Mountain View and wraps back around, sort of an irregular shaped lot that comes back to this stub of Millbrook Drive. The only thing that was abnormal, but not something that did not meet our subdivision regulations, was the way they wanted to create this lot with it, the property line basically bisecting this stub on Millbrook Drive. You have 25 feet this way and 25 feet this way. The subdivision regulations require 50 feet of frontage on a public street. However, you can have easements without the proper frontage, which they've depicted on this map here, and we asked them to create a 50 by 50 feet easement in case these lots were ever to develop, then the stub could be extended where they would have 50 feet of frontage on both sides.
And Mr. Ryder, could you just outline with the mouse the 5 lots now?
1, 2,
Okay.
3, 4, and 5.
Okay.
Did you have any questions?
That was my only question.
Did
Thank you,
anyone
Mr.
else
Ryder.
have any questions about this? Since we pulled it from the consent agenda, I need a motion to approve it.
Chairman, I move to approve the consent agenda.
All right, we've got a move to accept and approve the final plat of the Charles Poore Estate property. So we've got a motion to approve.
Second.
A second. Any other questions or discussion? Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Aldridge?
Yes.
Commissioner Bailey?
Yes.
Commissioner Lockmiller?
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy?
Yes.
Commissioner Oshenbein?
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Whitfield?
Yes.
Chairman Dagenhart?
Yes.
Motion's carried.
Okay, we've got an item of old business that's coming back. Ms. Warren, I think you're presenting on the a voluntary annexation.
Thank you, Mr. Ryder.
Hi, good evening, Commission. Sorry, I'm kind of losing my voice, so I'm going to do the best I can, but please, if you need me to stop and repeat something, please just say so, because I do acknowledge that I'm kind of going in and out here. But in front of you tonight, I have the Plan of Services and Zoning Assignment Review for approximately 58 acres located along Boones Station Road. I do want to take a second to address the timeline. This item does have a bit of a complicated history. You guys have actually heard this item twice before already. So if you'll see, on June 22nd, it passed City Commission's request to proceed. And then on July 12th, this item came before you with the request of R2C. You all deferred it to a subcommittee for further discussion on the zoning assignment. It came back August 9th, and the Planning Commission ultimately recommended the R2A zoning assignment moving forward. Well, now it is back before you again, and then if it continues along its scheduled timeline, it would go to the January 5th for its essentially first reading, January 19th, and then February 2nd. And for those in the audience, just so they're aware, that February 2nd would be the public hearing at City Commission. And again, this is just assuming it stays on this timeline and doesn't get deferred in any way. So with that being said, again, I mentioned that they originally had come before you all with the request of R2C. Well, since that request this summer, we have actually come out with the rural neighborhood zoning assignment. And so this applicant is now coming forward with the request of this new rural neighborhood district. The plan of services was in your packet. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have on that. But to talk a little bit about the zoning, and I know I've already briefly touched on the history, this was the original concept plan that came before you guys. And again, these are all non-binding plans, but this is what the applicant had originally submitted. And it was plans for a 221 lot subdivision. After they got sent into subcommittee, they heard you, and they heard that you guys wanted some bigger lots, a little bit more green space. So they resubmitted this lot, or this submission, that was a 200 lot subdivision, included a little bit more green and open space. And then they had also submitted this plan for an R2B, with the plans to do 184 lot subdivision, but you see you lose some of that green space that came before you with the R2C submission. And again, this is all just a history. These are past submissions that they've given at different, planning commission meetings back in July and August. So now what we have before you, excuse me, what we have before you tonight is this submission in front of us. It is 172 lot subdivisions. So again, I want to remind the commission that this originally came in with a request of 221 lots. This would abide by the rural neighborhood district. So the minimum lot size that they have proposed here is 7,500, and that is a zoning district minimum standard. I will say that the average lot size that they have in this submitted concept plan is about 10,000 square feet. And I'll specifically make note that one of the comments that the developer addressed was that these lots that currently abut this existing neighborhood, they all are actually about 13,000 square feet in this proposal. You've got about 7.71 acres of open space that includes a walking trail back over here, so they've added onto this green space. And you've got this walking trail and a pond up here. And just to refresh you guys, I know that y'all heard the rural neighborhood, I believe, at last month's meeting, but these would be the minimum standards with which they are held. And there is no binding concept plan for annexations, as I'm sure you guys know by now, but they do have binding obligations to zoning districts. So if they come in with this zoning assignment, they could not deviate from these minimum standards. It is currently zoned agricultural in the county. Our future land use map does propose that the area go residential. And just a little bit of talk about county zoning. These are some by right uses of what they could do in the county with this land. So if they wanted to develop under their current zoning district in the county, they would not have to go through any sort of public process to be able to do any number of those uses. I do think that it's also important to note that without sewer availability, they could still subdivide. They would be subject to a half-acre lot size, which is a little over 20,000 square feet. And with sewer availability by right, they could subdivide as small as 15,000 square feet. And I did also just want to point out that the applicant is free to pursue a rezoning in the county if they do not get annexed. And so I always like to bring up some of the county zoning districts, and I just wanted to compare those to the existing rural neighborhood as it is currently moving through the system. So just how those kind of compare a little bit. You'll see you're looking at the most similarity being the county R3. And so we actually have slightly larger requirements for some of that. So again, that lot width in the county R3 zoning district would be 50, 65. But again, this is what it's zoned in the county. So these are county zoning districts, and it's currently zoned A1. So if they wanted to pursue a rezoning, it would be exactly that. It would have to be a rezoning through the county. And again, that's just all what would happen if they took the county track. Last meeting, we talked a lot about density. And so I actually had this graphic at the last meeting for some surrounding densities. As you can see what it's kind of all built out to be in the area. The current submission proposes a density of about 2.9 units per acre. And so, again, originally it was sitting at about 3.8, and we've kind of continually come down off of those. But yeah, so our current submission is sitting at about 2.9. And you can see this is the surrounding neighborhoods of this area. Staff is recommending approval. A big point of that is that the future land use map, as we've talked about, does not differentiate between residential, not even multifamily and single family. So because the future land use map does propose this area go residential, the rural neighborhood is a residential district and is appropriate for the area. I have a vicinity map, and I am happy to answer any questions that you may all have. I know the applicant is here and plans on giving a site presentation, and I'm sure that you guys will have plenty of public comment.
Thank you, Ms. Warren. Questions for staff?
Ms. Warren, I have a question that I don't expect you to be able to answer, but I'd like to have an answer at some point. And
Absolutely.
the conversation that came up earlier today we recently approved, recommended going forward, the Coble annexation was around 500 units, is that correct?
About, yes, sir.
And so this one's 171. So now we're at 670 units, if this passes tonight, moving forward. Do you know how many others are in the works right now? How many other units are coming online or coming down the pipe towards us?
I had that exact number. I know that approximately a year ago, when we first had the influx of annexations, Mr. Mitchell at the time sat down and did a list of all of the numbers. And I want to say it ended up being like 2,000 for everything that we had. I know that some annexations have pulled out just due to current building costs. I will say that between Keebler and this right now, I don't have anything big coming up immediately down the pipeline at this moment.
That's my question is, and this is a conversation I think all of us are maybe wrestling with and struggling with, is, you know, we may approve one, we may approve another. And each one on its own merits can stand up. What I get concerned about for the city, if this passes, is what's the cumulative effect of all these developments? Can the city really live up to all these financial obligations, to the traffic, to the schools, to the police, to the fire? Everything that comes with not just one unit or one annexation, but multiple annexations all combined together. That's what kind of gives me heartburn at night. So, anyway, if you can have that number at some point, I would love to.
Yes, sir,
Mr. Mitchell's number,
absolutely.
any one number, yeah, but you don't need it tonight. Thank
To
you.
Commissioner Whitfield's point, that's very important for us as a city to be forward-thinking. Sitting at this table seems as if those who come are leading the efforts as to what happens. You know, we've been talking about a growth plan, and I've yet to see one. It's said that it's a year out.
Yes, sir.
But there's a lot of growth happening, and it'd be good to get ahead of it instead of it getting ahead of us. You know, we gotta, if you plan to fail, you fail to plan. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And it just will be helpful to us to make more wise and educated decisions if we could really get a collective plan to help us out as to what we're doing and where we're going as a city.
Peyton, writing on the backs of both of these gentlemen, when your group sits down to consider these developments, do you consider the people who come to the table? Do you talk about the water, the school, the police, the fire? No. It's all included in the discussion.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
You're talking to each of those departments independently, not as a group session?
No. Sorry. We all sit down and we have one large meeting. I do interact with each of them individually, very much so. But we all have one large meeting where every single department from the plan of services comes to the table, and we talk about these larger annexation requests and how the city can or cannot serve it. And so it is a group setting where everybody comes together, and staff does work very collectively, both with internal and external departments.
Is it accurate to say that each of those departments are looking at the accumulating effect of these annexations
Yes,
as
sir,
they're
absolutely.
adding up, and they're planning that into their future budgets?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Just looking at where I just got tickled. Sorry.
When we have our growth management meetings, which those tend to be monthly meetings, kind of as needed. Sometimes it's not quite that frequent. But we do all sit down as a large group, and sometimes we even discuss multiple annexations at once and talk about how they relate to each other. And so staff is working behind the scenes to look at this from, a 10,000-foot view. And tonight, especially as far as the zoning assignment goes, I would recommend that the Planning Commission do consider, based on this piece of land, not necessarily other annexations happening, what's appropriate for this piece of land. But I do want to ensure you commissioners that we take a very high-level integrated approach.
So those tipping points are recognized. There's a tipping point that
Yes.
so you get across some arbitrary number, then that says you got to build a new school, you got to put a new lift station in, you have to add a significant amount of money into infrastructure budgeting.
Correct, yes, sir.
If I could add just one thing here. She nailed it with all the meetings. Just remember, please remember that when they come out of these growth meetings and they've developed a plan of services, we are committing that we can do this. So if we could not do this with a plan of services, then we would not recommend to proceed with the annexation. Ultimately, the city commission can approve the annexations, but when we commit to that, we have a commitment from the city that we can do this. And when they do these things, as she said, they're taking the cumulative effect of the annexations. So if it gets to the point that they approve, we'll go forward with the plan of services. We'll, if they choose to annex the property, we are on the hook for providing those services, and we can provide those services if we agree to do it, or we wouldn't get that far along in the process.
Thank you, Mr. Wright.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Ryder. More conversations or questions for staff?
Do we have a comparison chart of the R2A, R2C, or R2B, R2C with the rural district? I feel like we had one a few meetings ago. I just wanted it. There we go.
I don't have it with, I don't have it with the rural neighborhood, but this is the R2A, R2B, R2C, and I'm happy to click out of this PowerPoint and try to like get a split screen going or something if that would be helpful.
That would be great. Thank you.
I'm actually just-
AV award.
That's right. PowerPoint tester. Thank you.
Right, hopefully that's helpful.
And the current lot size they're proposing is around 10,000 square feet, but that's non-binding.
The average.
The average is
Yes, sir. The
10,000.
average lot size right now is sitting at 10,000 square
And
feet.
that's non-binding.
Yes, sir. There's no binding concept plans for annexations.
Help me remember, do we get to approve the concept plan? I mean, the actual plan?
This will have to come back for you as a subdivision plat, if that's what you're asking.
Mhm.
Preliminary than the final plat.
So the design that's presented tonight is in theory, but we will get a chance to see it
Right.
again officially
Correct.
and approve it or change it.
So if it comes back and
Initial
all the
file.
lots are 7,500 and not 13,000, then we can address that then, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Can we deny it if it meets the minimums?
Probably not.
I don't think we can.
If the developer wants to develop in good faith in the city and continue developments in the future and have a good relationship with the city, then I would suspect we have no reason to doubt that they would not stick to something similar to what they're proposing here. However, it's not a binding concept plan. The preliminary plat that she's speaking of, with the subdivision plat, since they're the planning commission subdivision regulations and you have authority over the subdivision regulations, you have said that these subdivision regulations are appropriate for plats that come in. Therefore, if the preliminary plat meets the zoning code and the subdivision regulations, you would need to approve the preliminary plat. So they could all be 7,500 square feet, and if you approve the plat, then, or if the plat's brought before you, as long as it's meeting the subregs and the zoning code, then you would need a really good reason not to approve the plat. However, that's the risk you run of the property being annexed without a binding concept plan, but we can't require a binding concept plan. However, this developer's been back time and time again with proposals, and we frankly don't see people typically proposing 13,000 square foot lots. So it's a good plan, and but that is the risk that you take without a binding concept plan.
Thank you.
Any other question for staff? Thank you, Mr. Ryder. All right, I'm going to open the floor for public comment. Is anyone here to speak in favor or against? Please come forward. You'll have 3 minutes. If you'll please state your name and address at the podium.
Would it be possible to?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
My name's Bobby Genutolo. I live at 244 Laurel Canyon in the Meadows at Highland Park. I wanted to show kind of a broader picture of the land and the area surrounding this development. It includes old oaks in the county, some of the ridges. There where the little pin shows 244, that's Highland Park. And the other pin obviously shows the proposed annexation. And then coming on up Highland Church, it doesn't really show, it shows the land for Chestnut Cove. And then there's a little bit of Garland Farms. So as you can see from this, the most direct route to this proposal is Laurel Canyon, which there's only 2 roads in Highland Park. I want to make sure P. Kefauver Road up there is a dead-end road. So yes, there's an exit out of the proposal, but you've got to go to Boones Station. So there's only 2 accesses to this subdivision, Boones Station or Laurel Canyon. Up Highland Church and across to where it meets Boones Station or through Laurel Canyon. The other thing that just hits me, I mean, we've been here before, this rural neighborhood designation. And I'm reading from the city or the planning zone wording. The intent, a rural neighborhood development maintains the bucolic character of its surrounding by providing a visual buffer from the road, undulating berms, and compatible vegetation. While the development has traditional neighborhood features, it is intended to be located in areas where a small commercial node is nearby. It's been a long time since I got my degree at ETSU. I didn't know what bucolic meant, so I looked it up. Relating to the pleasant aspects of the countryside and country life. And by, again, undulating berms and compatible vegetation, from this concept, with the exception of the green space where the walking trail is, everywhere else where it borders Highland Park, the road is houses. Maybe some people consider that bucolic, I don't know. And the small commercial node nearby, they reference in a 1.5 miles and 4 minutes, I guess 2 gas stations, Waffle House and Poblano's is a small commercial node. When you look at the other D.R. Horton developments on Roan Street there by Zach's, you have obviously all that commercial development down through there, and the other Willow Springs development off Greenwood, where it joins ETSU and state of Franklin. There's all kinds of commercial development. Anyway, I know my time's up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, someone else?
Against, I'm Randy Sprinkle. Thank you for your
Can
time.
you tell us your address, please, sir?
495 Boones Station Road.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I'm gonna have to read what I wrote here, so, I'm Randy Sprinkle, I'm 56, I live on, Boones Station Road. And for 56 years, I've seen all the changes. I remember 26 exit before it was an exit and before it was an interstate. So, I've seen everything between Boones Creek Christian Church and Highland Church, over those years be developed. My grandparents gave Gravel Hill Baptist Church the property it sits on. It's right across from where I live. I pay taxes on 50 acres at the corner of Old Stage and Boones Station. So to say the least, this community is very special to me. This group of people who sit here tonight is not asking that you not develop this property. We've known for years that the time would come that our development, our community would be developed. We're just asking you as planners what you get paid for to plan the best for our community, not just tax revenue for the city. Our community has some really nice developments. Garland Farms, Keelan Estates are two of them. I believe the developers wanted to create a pleasant-looking community. Those developers, when they develop those, if you go look at them, they're not houses crammed on top of each other. They're spread out. They're really nice. They're really nice developments. The sole purpose for this development is not to build affordable housing at a reasonable price, but to reap every dime available and not leave a nickel on the table. That isn't good or the best for our community. I can't blame the developers for asking for too many houses per acre. It's more money for them and tax revenue for the city. The quality of the builder has also been questioned repeatedly. I propose if this moves forward that there would be extra inspections put on these houses. I'm not sure how we would do that, but electrical, plumbing, and as the build happens from start to finish, they need to have their eyes on them. Developers that's sitting in here, I challenge you to develop another Garland Estate or Keelan Heights. Any dummy can develop row identical housing. Do it right or don't do it. And for our builder, any shoddy builder can throw up a house. These are going to be here from now on. So, Planning Commission, please take this in consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Sprinkle.
Thank you for your time.
My name is David Sabula. I reside at 289 Laurel Canyon, Johnson City. Members of the Planning Commission, thank you for an opportunity to speak to you tonight, although I am frankly at a loss in understanding why we are here discussing this issue yet again. This commission has visited and revisited this issue on a number of occasions. Initially, this commission was unable to satisfactorily conclude the issue and so sent the issue to subcommittee, who returned their recommendations of R2A or B. This commission voted 6-2 in favor of an R2A zoning classification, which is consistent with the surrounding areas and the wishes of your constituents. The developer has previously submitted proposals to this body for both R2B and R2C during the aforementioned review process. Now, they submit yet another proposal against an as yet unapproved RN classification, which falls somewhere in between an R2B and an R2C. Given that neither the R2B nor the R2C classifications are no longer even on the table as a result of the previous vote of this commission, both this discussion and this new proposal seem to be both irrelevant and a waste of both your and my valuable time and my tax dollars that pay the salaries of the city employees that must spend time on this rather than other issues. If anything, this discussion should revolve around three salient issues. First, none of the issues, discussions, or obstacles previously brought before this commission have changed. Second, what, if anything, is the developer's proposal for the R2A classification? There's never been anything submitted or discussed along those lines, and there should be, since that is the stated wish of this commission and the constituents. Finally, and I cannot emphasize this issue strong enough, is that all of the proposals are non-binding. There is absolutely nothing stopping the developer from departing from the proposed plans and maximizing the number of dwelling units or minimizing the lot sizes once they receive the zoning classification they want. In fact, it is clearly in the developer's best financial interest to do so, and they can put any face or explanation on it that they want when they do. But the die will have already been cast, and there will be no undoing it. Therefore, I request that this commission stand by their previous recommendation of R2A to the City Commission and close this issue.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Spula.
Disclaimer,
thinking, but I got the same problem. And I'm going to repeat some stuff you've already heard, and you may hear it again, but I wrote it out, so I'm going to read it. Good evening, my name is David Lambert, and my wife and I live at 264 Laurel Canyon. A developer originally requested annexation of the Boones Station 58 acres property with an R2C zoning classification, which has a 6,000 square foot minimum lot size. On August 9th, after much discussion with input opposing R2C zoning from a large group of current Johnson City tax-paying residents and some comments from your planning staff, you approved R2A zoning because its 12,000 square foot minimum lot size was the same as the adjacent Meadow subdivision and thus followed existing zoning code 6.10.1.3. Since then, the developer has requested numerous delays and City Commission has never discussed your recommendation. You've now voted on a part of a concept for overall change to all single-family districts and have said it's time sensitive to begin adopting one of those new classifications called Rural Neighborhood, or RN, because developers, including the developer for Boones Station, want to use the new classification. The RN proposal has not received final approval from the City Commission. Now the developer has presented a revised plan using the RN classification minimum lot size of 7,500 square feet, which is only slightly larger than the initial requested 6,000 square foot minimum lot size, which you denied. The revised plan shows about 171 homes, many on around 8,000 square foot or smaller lots. The R2A classification you previously approved would permit around 100 homes on this property. The developer updated concept proposal, which I understand they have no requirement to follow, shows access from either both ends of a narrow Boones Station County road or from an already congested Laurel Canyon. Laurel Canyon has approximately 100 single-family homes occupied by current Johnson City taxpayers. It's 1.3 miles from Michaels Ridge Boulevard along Highland Church to the property. The route using Laurel Canyon is about 1/2 mile shorter. Thus, it's logical to assume much of the traffic to this property will follow the Laurel Canyon route. This is not a rural area. It abuts the Meadows, which is across the street from the Ridges, over the hill from Chestnut Cove and Garland Estates. Assigning the RN classification to the Boones Station annexation presents the same issues that you voted against on August 9th. I strongly encourage you to keep the R2A zoning recommendation which you previously made. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Lambert, very much.
Thank you.
Someone else, please. We'll pass them down. You'll give me just a second.
Good evening, Commission. My name is Andrew Ferguson. I live at 284 Laurel Canyon. I'm going to start with what I had planned to close because some of my neighbors have kind of addressed some of these issues, and I'll come back to some other things. But I want to urge you all as leaders to please invest the time, the energy, the resources necessary to completely develop a thorough and well-coordinated zoning code that protects each area of our community from opportunistic, profit-driven developers, as this work, or lack thereof, will dictate the future of what this community looks like, that we're all invested in. And understand that given the national economics and the local economics, that competition is going to increase. It's only a matter of time before Lennar and Pulte are here creating more competition, which is going to drive profits down, which is why we find ourselves in a rush right now. Before you, I've put together some data because I analyzed data, and I wanted to look at how does the minimum requirements of this proposal reflect the other proposals, and as you can see, it's more close to R2C than it is close to R2A. However, in the verbiage of the document, it's referred to as similar to R2A and R2B. I think that's a little misleading. I would ask that maybe that be considered to be replaced. The other issue is I wanted to maybe encourage the commission to consider evaluating acreage in addition to square footage, because I feel like square footage, you have the inclination to think, hey, that's 6,000 square foot to 12,000 square foot, while you're doubling that until you realize that's 0.14 and 0.27 acres. And then you say to yourself, hey, that's not really that big. And then I may run out of time, but I wanted to dig in a little bit to the context of size and actual density. Last time I spoke on the as-built density of the surrounding area is significantly less dense than what's being proposed. That's still the case. That's one of the analysis that I've provided to you. But the other analysis I wanted to do was just from a general context, what defines a small lot? So I started to analyze the tree streets, and I went on the zoning map and allocated every single property on the south side of West Maple Street, and I've plugged in the data on what the actual lot size is in acreage, because that's how it's provided on the zoning map, not square footage. And what you'll find is the actual simple average of 66 lots is 0.24 acres, quarter of an acre, which is very close to the representation of what the minimum lot size of R2A is. There's been all this dialogue back and forth about, I read the meeting minutes from the 11-8 meeting. It said large lots equals large homes, which do not equal affordable homes. Well, I find that to be misleading and untrue given the actual data. 0.25 acre lot is not, frankly, a large lot. A developer can choose to build an affordable home on a decently sized lot instead of cramming them in, but we all know why they do it. It's because it's for profit. The last comment I want to make, like they've said, is it's a non-binding concept plan. Please finish developing. We want this to be developed. We want it to be developed right, where it adds value to the city and everything in our neighborhood. Please finish developing the other zoning codes and encourage the developer to use a combination of those to accomplish whatever objective it is. This legally does not protect any of us from the worst case scenario, which is a default back to the minimum requirement, which, as the economic environment in the housing market worsens nationally, it's only going to create more pressure here. So thanks for your time, and hope you have a Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson.
One point here which may help for the public comment, I think, and Whitney brought it up, just for clarification. The 171 lots, that's what the plan of services is on the hook for. So with that concept plan, it's not, what's that? But that's what the plan of services is planning for, is the proposed number of houses. Okay. Right. All right. Oh,
Could you clarify, please?
yeah, go ahead.
They just asked a question about because the concept plan isn't binding, right, with annexations. Nothing about how it's laid out is binding. And so they brought up the question of, well, the plan of services is binding, as it was for Keebler. If you guys remember the discussion of the Keebler annexation, it actually outlines how many homes they can build in a certain time frame, and that's based on a sewer capacity problem. And so there was the thought of maybe this annexation has the same thing for this certain number of lots, but it is not laid out the same as the Keebler annexation for the plan of services, because there isn't actually a threshold that they're crossing that would cause them to be unable to be served, whether it's this or an additional built-out density. That's all.
Okay, I think I understand.
Thank you.
Thank you. More comment from the public, please. Please come forward.
Good evening, Commissioners. Roger Varan. I live at 1284 Gray Station Road. I would just like to touch on some things that were brought up at the November 8th Commission meeting. Commissioner Aldridge stated, quote, "The community is growing quickly and we need to prepare," end quote. Commissioners, you have stated with the growth the way it is currently happening, there must be better collaboration with Washington County to work through all these issues as a region. When will that happen? because I have not yet seen any attempt between the city and the county as of yet. I agree that as a Washington County Planning Commissioner myself, we do need to get together and talk through these issues. And Commissioner Ashenbaum, you quoted, sir, we want it in the record. The city commission needs to emphasize smart growth with this request and all other like it in the future, end quote. How is a proposed plan of this scale considered smart growth when the city already has a strained system with examples of schools, roadways, transit, fire, and police, and et cetera? So that's what my thoughts on this is. And this ties in with the Keebler annexation as well. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Pat Sabila. I live at 289 Laurel Canyon. I'm going to speak on behalf of my daughter who doesn't want to get up here. She's a high schooler, 11th grader. There are classrooms in the cafeteria because there's not enough room in the classrooms. These houses get built, the Keebler one gets built, these classrooms are going to be overpacked. They don't have the room for the students. This can't happen now. We're not ready for it.
Thank you. Anyone else here to speak to the question?
My name is Mark Brown, I live at 214 Laurel Canyon. I'm not a lawyer, but I think I have some pretty good common sense. If anybody up there was gonna build a house, and you got a contractor, and you sat down and, this is the house I want. Here's the square footage, these are all, this is the price I want to pay. Keep hearing binding, non-binding. If you're going to have this contractor, I'm pretty sure you're all going to want a binding contract. You're not going to say, sign my name to this and let them build whatever they want if I'm paying for it. I would think you would want binding. The thing that makes me wonder is, why isn't it binding? I don't know the legal aspects of any of this, but why isn't it binding? Why can't I, if I was a contractor, why could I come to you and say, this is what I'm gonna build for you, this is what you're gonna pay me for, life is good. And then I just do what I want and say, oh, well, it's non-binding. So what are they hiding? Why can't they give what they're actually going to do? The last time I was here for one of these, the developer put a pretty picture up of two little houses. Well, this is what they should look like. What should look like isn't anything. There's your non-binding. Oh, it's going to look similar to this. I've looked at a lot of these developments. I haven't seen any of these houses that they showed up there. I guess that's the non-binding. I can give you this carrot and say, oh, this is what you're going to get, but do you actually get it? So I think we need to take a long look, and I don't know if it's up to you guys on this committee or not, to look at this binding and non-binding. Either they're going to do it or they're not going to do it. They can't just come in and say, here, this looks good, and then down the road, we're going to build something different, and it's too late now. You guys already said, do it. So I'm telling you, think about this binding and non-binding. If it's not up to you to change it, then we need to find out who is that can actually do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Thank you.
Next. Is the developer here? No, go ahead. Please come forward.
How are y'all? I'm Russell Ingram, 248 Laurel Canyon. Kind of hard to follow up everybody here. They've done a great job. But I mainly want to get up here and first say how impressed I've been through this process the first time we did it. I figured when we initially went through here, you guys were just going to rubber stamp it and move on. But the amount of deliberation and dialogue that you guys have had over that period, and then even kicking it to a subcommittee and then coming back and ultimately deciding to be R2A was really impressive to watch. And so I think what I'm mainly up here to say is when I look at the difference, when you saw that little grid, and you look at the difference between this new rural, presentation versus what R2C is, that is much more closely related than the R2A. So after all that time you guys had spent deliberating and figuring out what you felt was best for this particular area, you came up with R2A. And so this is a far cry from that. And so unfortunately, you guys' time is valuable, and I feel like they're just bringing this back and painting it into a different color. But essentially, it's as close as possible to R2C. So what I would just request is that you guys continue with all the deliberation that you already did and keep it as R2A, which is consistent with the rest of the area that we're in. And so, again, thank you for all your hard work, but that's all I have.
Thank you,
You're
Mr.
welcome.
Ingram.
Absolutely.
Floor is still open.
I just scrolled down, right? All right. I'm back. I want to appreciate everyone's time.
Could
I know
you
this-
state your name?
Oh, I'm sorry. John
please?
McKenzie. I, 1090 West Exchange, Allen, Texas, up suburb of Dallas, with Allied Development.
Thank you, Mr. McKenzie.
I know this has been daunting for everyone, including council, including neighborhoods. We went away to analyze, to understand, to listen to, and basically try to develop a plan that would suffice for everyone's needs, okay? I understand the binding and non-binding, and a lot of that can be addressed as we get closer to the actual plat and the final plat. But at the end of the day, we're hopeful to have a development here in Johnson City. That's what we're hopeful for. There are some requirements that are just necessary, and I get everyone talks about density, but at the same time, we're trying to create a neighborhood. And so we've taken in consideration the open space, the consideration of developing perimeter lots that would be right-sized, even consideration of buffers that would be considered. I mean, our goal is to develop a plan that not only works on behalf of the development, but also works on the community. So that plan, as we discussed with staff, we've been at this I've been at it since February. So I'm now 10 months into it, and I'll continue as long as it takes. Yes, this is our plan. Try to meet the threshold of 10,000 square foot lots as an average. With that, we have 13,000, we have 14,000. We have essentially, let me get to this one. We have essentially over 50% of this plan is over 10,000 square foot lots, okay? 25% of that is over 12,000 square foot lots. So we are making a diligent effort to get to those larger lots on the perimeter. Part of this also really gets it back into the open space. Open space, everything from trails, everything from amenities, those are part of what neighborhoods are. We're prepared to, create more visual plans, but we got to know that we're headed in the right direction. That's what we're trying for, is knowing that we're headed in the right direction. I brought my engineer here today. He can talk a little bit about some of the technical aspects of things. We did analyze, we're in the process now of doing the traffic impact analysis. We did see here move the egress into the space, so we've got stubs in for future growth. When that happens, we don't know, but we put them there anticipating for future growth. So we're trying to plan ahead just as well as everyone else. I understand in this aspect, again, we've taken into consideration the neighborhood. Everything highlighted in the teal color just north here, or that would be east, these are all 13,000, which are larger than the 12,000 adjacent to the properties. Okay, all down throughout here are 12s, all throughout here are 10s. We put a kiosk here for the mail. We've given egress into the open space, the trails. Again, I understand the binding and non-binding, but we wouldn't be here if we weren't going to build something that would survive. We've talked about the elevations before. We're looking for quality product. I get, again, everyone's concerns. We look at price points. We know that things are cost more to build, but we also know that affordability is an issue, especially with interest rates. So we're trying to provide inventory that alleviates some of the concerns with the growing of Johnson City. Okay? Any questions?
Can I ask a question?
Yes. Do you mind a question?
Go ahead.
So the lots you said were 13,000, 10,000, are the other lots just the minimum of 7,500?
I would say most of them are 8,000.
8,000.
But there are some minimum of 7,500, yes. And so to get to the average of 10,000, you can't just have 75. So that's why we've got 50% more than 10,000.
Thank you.
For this zoning designation, which requires no more than 30% footprint on the property lot,
Yes.
and if you look at these lots, what are you looking at the scale of the square footage for the property homes being?
Yeah, anywhere from 16 to 24, 2,500 square feet.
So not up to 3,000?
No.
Okay.
Some of the 13,000 square foot, I mean, they will accommodate larger, for sure. But we also have to gauge what the market is really needing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, newer designs, newer footprints of the structural design doesn't really require 3,000 to 4,000 square foot homes. They're much more efficient now. Families look at cost of build cost, management cost, efficiencies. You know, everything is going towards efficiencies.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Could you make any kind of educated guess on what the cost will break down for these homes?
Yeah, so I put in here on a rough, on the single story homes, it's probably price range from $395 to $445.
Okay.
And then you can go anywhere up to $550 for the 2-story homes.
Okay.
And again, market will dictate
Sure.
what that price will ultimately be.
The market and the Fed, I think.
Yeah.
And can you speak at all about some of the community questions and concerns regarding the egress from the neighborhood?
Sure. So that's why we're working on the traffic impact, because we know that this is a huge concern. Certainly here's our primary and here's our secondary up here. You know, this is an existing stub. If that wasn't existing, it wouldn't be there. So this is a future stub that again allows, you know, for all your services, whether it be fire, police or whatnot, they always prefer the additional stubs for egress throughout the space. So we are doing the traffic impact analysis as part of the preliminary plat.
And so, and just pointing again to the 2 egresses, the main.
Yeah, this is the main down here.
Yep, okay.
And this is the secondary right here. And we know that this is kind of a dead-end road, so we know that this will have improvements up to our egress.
Okay.
And those improvements will be bared at our cost.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
More questions? Thank you, Mr. McKenzie.
Yes.
Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak to the question? I'm going to close the floor for public comment. Did you change your mind?
2,000 square feet, over $400,000.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Marie Flanagan. I live at 210 Michaels Ridge Boulevard in Highland Park. And I was here for 2 of the previous meetings, the one at which the 12,000 square foot decision was made by you all, and I appreciated that. Something confusing has happened here. This rural neighborhood thing, at that previous meeting, it was stated that the only options that were available were R2, R2A, R2B, R2C, nothing else. And if something else came up and was desired by the developer or anybody, the whole process would have to start over again completely. And there would be no way to sort of jump over and go to something new like this rural topic. The other question that I would have would be, we hear that all these services are covered, we can handle it from the staff, and that's good, that's positive. But I'm wondering, how would things like improvement of Boones Station Road to accommodate emergency vehicles and school buses, how would that be handled? Who pays for it? Is it the current taxpayers? Or are we hoping that the buyers of the homes in this new development are the ones who are going to be bearing the cost of that? Yes, I understand that sewer and water and all of that can be handled, and fine, but what about road improvements? Because that's fairly important. Those are country roads. Those are not roads like Boones Creek or even like Highland Church. I would appreciate, I have appreciated the even-tempered manner in which you all, commissioners, have handled all these questions in the past. And I would hope that you would continue to do that for the sake of neighbors, taxpayers, and our entire community here. We are growing. Let's grow wisely. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Flanagan.
Thank you.
Whitney, could you come up for just a second and just make one statement about the creation of the new zoning code? RN, and that's, I don't think, officially on the books yet.
It is not officially on the books. So, as we all know, the zoning ordinance is created on paper or written on a computer. So at times when we need to make changes, because we are a growing and changing city, we do make changes. And one of the things that we noticed was that some of these zoning districts, which have these R and a number, don't actually have guidance to where they could be placed. And our land use plan only gives us guidance for residential, and it doesn't necessarily tell us whether that residential should be single family, multifamily, or any type of style. That's why the city is embarking on a growth plan update. So what planning staff wanted to do was to create new zoning districts that would not conflict with the future objectives of the growth plan. Therefore, we started with the rural neighborhood because there was some precipice for that, and have moving into working on some of the others, like an urban residential, a suburban, as well as a rural residential.
What's the status of rural residential being enforced or available?
Or adopted?
Adopted.
Its next step would be to be adopted. The third reading is on Thursday.
The third reading in front of the city commission?
Yes, public comment was on December 1st.
Okay. So it can go into effect this week, but it's not in effect today?
If it's not in effect, it can go into effect this week.
Okay, thank you. All right, is anyone else here to speak to the question? I'm going to close the floor for public comment. Thank you all very much for your comments. So now I think it's a conversation for us.
I'd just like to make a statement. I just want everyone to know that you can have faith in the people on this board. We are acutely aware of everything that you brought up today. We discuss it. We try to find solutions to air growth. And we appreciate your comments, but just know that we are doing our due diligence as well. So thank you.
Peyton, or may I ask Peyton a question?
Yes, certainly may.
Do I understand that the zoning request tonight has not been approved by the city commission yet?
The zoning district,
Yeah, the rural neighborhood.
the rural neighborhood, it is currently in process, and like Whitney mentioned, it is up for its third and potentially final reading this Thursday at City Commission.
If we were to want to agree that that is the best designation for a zoning RN, we would need to make that contingent on that passing on third reading in 2 days.
I would like to ask Chairman, is it feasible that we could table this until the next meeting and see what the city commission does?
Yes, we can do that.
It is, you can make your motion the way you also made your Keebler motion, because that also, you heard both the rural neighborhood and Keebler annexation on the same night, and you moved that one forward.
What would be your purpose for wanting to table it? Do you have because RN's not officially in place?
Yes.
We've got, as she just said, we've got a precedent for proceeding anyway.
Since we're on the third, since they are on the third reading of the RN, they are at a point where there will not be any additions or alterations. It'll just be an up or down vote from the city commission. Am I correct on that?
Really getting used to this row. No, actually, the city commission can still make changes.
Okay.
It's just that the public comment period has ended. They are still, I think they're still having some discussion around the buffer width and consistency.
Wait,
I'm sorry.
While you're there, can you explain or just kind of go over, or maybe this is Peyton's wheelhouse, why something can be not binding at this particular stage?
So the not binding is a great question, and I think that everybody in this room, me, the developer, you all, and everybody sitting here would love if it was binding. But the state of Tennessee would not love that. So what happens with annexations, and this is state law, so this is above local law, this is Tennessee Code annotated state law, basically says that we cannot have a binding concept plan for an initial zoning assignment. And that's because the way zoning works is it allows us as a city to guide development. So you have certain zones, so you can kind of figure out, okay, these uses are more appropriate, so you don't end up with an industrial center next door to a neighborhood. The whole foundation of zoning. And so what happens when you come in and have to have a binding concept plan with a zoning district, when you first enter into that, is it really restricts an owner's property rights. And so they're saying, hey, we want to annex into the city. And so by state law, you're allowed to have all of the entitlements that comes with that zoning district because you just got it. You don't have anything that you're going off of. So it's not like, a commercially zoned property inside of the community already, and they say, hey, we actually want to go to something else. Well, they already have the full entitlements of whatever their district is. This piece of land, when it's coming into the city, it doesn't have any entitlements until we give it a zoning district. And so what a binding concept plan would do is it would take away those entitlements. And so that's the foundation for why the law is the way it is. But yes, commissioners, that is unfortunately a state law.
Peyton, so there's no way, I think I'm hearing, that if we approve the RN, that we could approve it contingent upon the percentages that the developer gave us, that's going to be the 13,000 lots and the 10,000 lots. Can we do that?
Whitney brought up a really great point tonight about writing that into the plan of services, because that is, a binding document. And that is, like I mentioned earlier, something that we did with Keebler was bind our plan of services to a certain housing unit, because that's what we could like, that's what we had the ability to serve. We as a city could not serve more than a certain amount in a certain time frame. But I really honestly have not thought about that until Whitney just mentioned it, and I don't know the legality of that. If we bind them to something that we could potentially still serve the full amount of, if that makes sense. Because they're not crossing a threshold. There's not a question with this development of they can build X amount of houses and then we need sewer improvements. That's not in question in this development as it was in Keebler, which is why we were able to add that binding note. And so I'm not sure if we could do something like that within the plan of services.
So
or
if
not.
if he builds every lot at 7,500 square feet, how many houses can he get on this property? Do we know that?
It depends exactly how it's laid out. Whitney's doing a quick math problem right now.
248.
The original was 2.
And then the next question would be, have you all taken that into consideration when you met with the plans of services?
The plan of services was actually based on a potential full entitlement build-out. So the financial analysis that you all have in front of you is based on the plan that they've proposed. However, because the plan of services is legally binding, and we are on the hook, we do go ahead and plan for the highest possible, just in case, because it is, again, a legally binding document. So the plan of services does account for full entitlement build-out.
Thank you.
The rural neighborhood, if it is altered by the city commission, we made a vote on text that was not yet approved, I guess, by the city commission. So if that does change, then does the Keebler annexation, and if we approve this, would have to come back to us then again? They would not. That's interesting.
Because when the zoning district, you basically have said the zoning district is okay, so it's moved forward.
The zoning district based on a rural neighborhood.
Rural neighborhoods, yes,
Yeah.
rural neighborhood, but you've also said the rural neighborhood moved forward. And there's not been any significant changes to the rural
Yeah.
neighborhood design. The only thing that they have done is actually work on your question about making the buffer not necessarily as loosey-goosey. Best word I got. And so they're working on that language. They also looked at the duplex and how that was done, but pretty much that's the same. So as long as even if they made those changes, it wouldn't need to come back.
Okay, so if none of the actual sizes changed or anything like that.
Because none of that is being proposed to change.
Okay, but if those things were changed, it would come back?
I don't think so.
No.
Okay.
If they ended up changing them, they would not come back.
So
We
therefore
would see it when the actual plan comes
Yeah.
back to us, right?
If
when we would see it.
If the zoning district, we're talking about the zoning district, if the zoning district changes, then it doesn't necessarily have to come back to you guys, because you have, especially if it changes from, if it gets larger, I don't think they would have to come back to you guys. Even if it changed to go smaller, it would not have to come back necessarily. But I don't think that's actually what the city commission would likely do. I think if they made substantial changes, y'all are their recommending body, and they would want your opinion on it. I'm pretty confident on that part.
Peyton, where are we? Because we voted for R2A. You know, right. Legally, where do we stand as far as that's concerned with us?
You guys voted to recommend R2A moving forward, and the developers actually come back with a new request. So you guys, what you're taking on action on tonight is the request of rural neighborhood.
So tonight negates what we did? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, what you did still happened, but they're coming forward with a new request.
They're asking for a new zone
Brand new.
designation.
So they're asking for a new zone, so you would have to say no to the current request, and you have to say propose R2A.
Do we have to say no to the R2A that we've already done?
They
No.
revoked that application, correct?
Oh, they
Correct,
revoked
correct.
it.
So
that
this,
is-
yes,
so
correct.
all
So
that-
that,
yeah,
this is
that's-
a
that was-
completely new proposal under
Yeah.
the rural neighborhood.
Should say no.
So they did not like the R2A, so they do not plan to advance with that. They pulled back on that, from my understanding, right?
Right.
Yeah.
No. Floor's closed, I'm sorry.
No.
question what the builder just said?
No, sir.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. discussion further?
We made a recommendation as a strategic subcommittee to move forward with R2A or R2B.
R2A.
R2A.
The subcommittee
The
said
subcommittee
R2A.
recommended A or B.
A or B.
The commission chose A.
Okay. I'm trying to understand, why would we do anything different than the recommendation?
I think,
I mean, it's just an
Peyton,
innocent question.
I think
Can
because
we-
the R2A.
Can we have the
and-
developer maybe explain why he doesn't want
Why
to
is
do
there a
R2A
deviation?
and why he's chosen to do the RN? Is there any way that he could help us understand why he's doing that?
yes, ma'am, you guys can continue to ask the
Yeah.
applicant questions.
Commissioner Murphy to answer. Commissioner Murphy to answer your question, though, I think, from my understanding, the subcommittee recommended R2A or R2B.
B, correct.
Came back to the commission body, we recommended R2A. And then since that time, Development Services has kind of reworked all of the zones and taken R2A and B off the table just to have the rural neighborhood.
No, R2A
No,
and B are still
R2A,
there.
Just an
they're still there, they
They're
just
all still
added the
there.
RN.
We're adding RN.
The applicant asked for a particular zoning.
Yeah.
Not my understanding.
A and B are still
A
there.
Hey,
new
could you
zone
clarify
came to
that
the
for
table
us,
that
please?
they like.
So
They can pick whatever zone they want.
the idea moving forward is that as we introduce these new residential districts, they do take the place of the existing R2s. We've only written one district thus far. So rural neighborhood is the only thing that's come in. As we continue to add those districts that have that contextual significance that says, hey, this development that's going in the heart of town is gonna look a lot different than this development that's going on the outskirts of town. When we get single-family developments, the goal is for them to only come in as one of our new zoning districts. We are not looking to take the R2s out of our zoning district because we do not want to create a situation where we have just an overwhelming amount of unconforming lots and nonconformities throughout the city because we just said these zoning districts don't exist. But correct, Commissioner Aldridge, moving forward, or whoever said it, Commissioner Whitfield, maybe it was you, sorry. Moving forward, the idea is to get away from the R2. So when we have rezonings, when we have zoning assignments and new assignments coming in, they would go to those new zoning districts. I don't know if we're quite at a place where we can completely hop and jump into that ship, but that is moving forward the vision
That was my
as we
understanding.
develop the rest of the zoning
Thank you, Ms.
assignments,
Moore.
or zoning districts.
So are you saying the R2A and B are different than what we had before?
No, sir.
They're the same?
Yes, sir. All
So-
of the R2s remain unchanged.
Okay,
Instead of
so my
rather-
question still stands, why are we deviating? And so you got the developer here, and he can explain himself.
One of the primary reasons is trying to accommodate not just the size of lots, but the open space. We did a lengthy discussion about how a community should look, how a community should feel. So incorporating open space, incorporating other amenities into the space. At 12,000, there's no room. And to give us a blend, a mix of product is the reason why we're trying to incorporate a community as a whole. So our proposal, the new based upon RN, is allowing us to not only suffice the perimeter as larger lots, but also create that community living as far as open space and everything else combined.
Could you not do open space if you wanted to in R2A and R2B?
So at 12,000 square foot lots,
I mean, either
There's-
or,
there's not a-
it's 12 or 9.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
12,000.
We
for-
proposed, we proposed that was
A
denied.
is 12.
But I'm saying what we proposed was A or B.
But the commission voted on R2A.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's 12,000.
But even if, regardless of what it is, it's up to the developer if he wants to put open space in it. I mean, he's not, he can put open space in whatever he wants to, right?
Yeah, it's just
Okay.
less lots. Sure. I mean, so we're trying to accommodate both.
So can I ask you another question?
ma'am.
So the plan that you have proposed right here,
Yes.
what would cause that to change?
So we've done all of our wetland study, we've done our geotech study, we've done all of our studies As far as the property itself, all that's left is the traffic impact. We've met with staff, we adjusted some stubs to accommodate future growth. At this point, you know, we like this layout because it gives us the blend that we're looking for. We've also incorporated, you know, the mailbox kiosk, which by right gives egress into the trail area. So we've spent a lot of time and a lot of money on developing this plan. This is the plan that we like.
Okay. All
And
right,
it gives
then-
us, it gives us a blend of size.
Then my next question is the road improvements, and Peyton, I might need you guys for this, but did I hear you say you were going to improve some of the
Well,
roads?
certainly the, what's the dead end road, right?
Keep
Up to our egress, that would need to be
Mouse.
improved, right?
Mouse to point.
Oh, I'm sorry, right here.
So how would that be improved? Are you adding a turn lane, or what are you
Well,
doing
the
there?
traffic impact analysis will tell us what
Okay.
needs to be added. And so that's a very important report that will be part of the Plat, preliminary plat.
And that's going to be your cost? You're doing that?
That's correct.
Okay. What about on the other egress? Is
This is
anything needed there?
Right here would need to be determined with the traffic impact. Again, this is being just a single road of egress between us and the neighbor is different than the primary access.
Okay. Thank you.
You referred earlier in your conversation about what the market wants, what the market can support.
Sure.
And I think I was understanding you, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the market is looking for not the 3,000 to 4,000 square foot houses, but something more in the
Yeah.
2,000 to 2,500 square.
Well,
foot.
when you think about new families, right? Some of the market that we analyze are looking for more efficient, smaller homes. A lot of that has to do with the build cost. I could build a 3,000 to 4,000 square foot home at $250 a square foot, whatever the build price is for that market. That prices out a lot of potential home buyers. So people are looking for nicer, more efficient homes in a smaller footprint. You don't necessarily have a lot of wasted space that you would see back in the last 20 years or so.
And in your
So-
studies, I mean, I have heard this, I don't know, I don't know where I don't know if it's facts or not, but is it not true that families nowadays, new families, starting out, they don't want the big yards, they don't want the,
Absolutely, absolutely.
I
I mean,
heard that, I
it's
just
a
didn't know.
maintenance, there's trends are changing, and so developers and builders have to change with those trends, for sure. And it is more efficiency.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
No, may I ask him a question?
Yes, I'm sorry. Please.
I think that you stated in one of the meetings, I can't remember, that this would be a 5 to 7 year project. Am I wrong?
No, this is
That was it,
different.
okay.
No.
Another development.
Okay, yeah.
I was wondering about, because services have been brought up, so what?
Sure. Usually about this size of project is about 18 months to 2 years.
And I'd like to just mention the issue about the school, because I do sit on the Johnson City School Foundation Board, and they are very much aware of the growth in Johnson City and very much aware of what they need to do and are planning accordingly. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Kinsey.
Okay, we've got to move this forward somehow.
Yes, we do.
Or would you like me to jump in the fire?
Yes, please.
This may be out of not following Robert's rule, Robert. I would like to make a motion that we keep it as we voted before, at 2A residential.
You'd like to move that we recommend the zoning classification of 2A?
Yes.
Can't do that.
Yeah.
We can't do that
Can't
right
do
now.
that. Can we?
We have to yea or nay this.
Yes, we have
It's
to.
either yea or nay.
We have to either approve his request or deny. Rule.
Yeah, RN.
The way I look at it right now is I feel a lot better, I feel better with the lots being 13,000 and 10,000. I like the walkway, I like the pond. You know, I think the developer is trying to have a average of the big lots and medium-sized lots. I think I'm comfortable with the RN based on this plan, but again, my concern is, will it change? And that's why I wanted to ask him how set are we on this plan? Because that's a risk we take.
I have a technical expert. You want to ask?
Sure, come on up.
Just addressing this. Hello, my name's Brent Neeson. I live at 8518 Triad Drive, Colfax, North Carolina. I'm with John on this for the engineering side of it. But one thing I wanted to point out was a lot of what you see here was very well thought out in the sense of meeting the zoning conditions versus what is feasible with the land that is there. These lots that we're talking about, in the majority of it being the 12K to 13K, 14K lots, those have a width of 65 feet, which is the minimum width for the zoning. However, for those size and with the buffers that we're considering, they have to remain that size. They're not going to vary much because of the buffers that are in place with the lot pad you're going to have to put on there. So when you're looking at this and you're looking at how the grading's going to work out, how the traffic's going to work out, how the lot dimensions are right now, the variance in there is not, it wouldn't allow for anything that would change that much. I mean, will there be variations in road configuration? Absolutely. That happens when going through the development side and working with the DOTs and your environmental qualities and with planning staff. But for the vast majority of what we're talking about for those lot sizes there, and to answer your question, they cannot change due to those restrictions in the proposed zoning. So that should give some relief that it's not just thrown on there for illustrative purposes. There is actual restrictions that are limiting those lots to be those sizes based on what was provided. So,
Thank you.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
So I want to raise the question about what motions are appropriate at this time. It's our responsibility to identify and recommend a zoning assignment.
That's true.
And that does not, to me, I don't translate to mean that we have to assume that we make a motion to approve this one and either vote it up or vote it down. We can make a motion to make whatever assignment we choose.
That's what we did last time, right?
But we have to address the applicant's
You have
request.
to address the applicant's request, because you will be sending this motion forward. So you need to address that you would need to make, if you wanted to deny the zoning district, you would need to make a motion to
The
deny
requested zoning
the
district.
requested
Okay.
zoning district. You would need to make a motion on that, because that way you will let the city commission know that it should not come back to you as that.
All right, thank you for clarification.
And last time we voted to deny and then we assigned a new one to go forward.
Correct.
Yeah.
Thank you for helping me remember that.
And we're required to do that again tonight?
You
correct?
are, yes.
Okay.
If we deny it.
If you go that
Correct.
direction.
So I think, if I recall correctly, Ms. Parliamentarian, we must make a motion in the affirmative, and it might fail.
Correct.
So the motion might be, we move to approve this zoning request, and then it either passes or fails.
Correct. And then if it fails,
you will need to assign another,
Make a different
make a motion
recommendation.
to assign another zoning, and that would also have to
Pass or fail.
pass.
I'll make the motion that we go ahead and approve the RN contingent upon the city commissioning, or commissioners voting, I
RN
guess,
through-
having the
approved.
third reading and voting.
Implementing, putting it into place, RN.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we've got a motion.
And I will second that motion, but I just want to be clear. By second this motion, we're all voting on this, and we can decide yay or nay. If we decide nay, we can designate another zoning assignment if we
can
so
make
wish.
another recommendation.
Can make another recommendation if we so wish.
That's correct.
So I second.
All right, any discussion about this motion and second to approve the zoning request that has been requested of RN and the plan of services attached to it? Okay, Nicole, I'm waiting to see how this is going to turn out. Call the roll.
Me too. Commissioner Aldridge.
Yes.
Commissioner Bailey.
No.
Commissioner Lockmiller.
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy.
Just real quick, I think it's important to address some of the comments that have been made by the public here today in terms of making sure we have good inspections on all builders in the community. I do believe in our staff, and I've had personal conversations with the inspectors here, and so they've made commitments to make sure that we have good building in our city. Also, to Commissioner Duran, Washington County Commissioner, thank you for coming today. Yeah, we need to do better at collaborating and coordinating. I do believe there is an effort, but it's not like identified. There's no name to it. It just happens organically. So I do want to acknowledge your concern, and I'm in full support of that taking place. Schools are overcrowded. Something needs to happen. I do know there is conversation taking place right now within leadership as to how that's going to be addressed. Because if it doesn't, you're going to have trailers outside your schools, and that's not a good look. But that is an area of concern. To the developer, that is a well thought out plan. I want to say you've done a good job in putting that together. I was able to go out to the site today and look at it and visualize it myself. What I don't like about this process is the non-binding thing. You know, you can approve a zone, but any developer can come in and change your mind and do something different. That's not okay. It's almost like signing a blank check. That's something I'm very uncomfortable with, and you know, I'm not here to change the process. I mean, if that's the state, if that's what the state wants, that's what we have to abide by. I also believe that we need to be consistent with the decisions we've made. I mean, there was a recommendation that was sent up as R2A. I don't know why I would walk in a meeting and just change my mind all of a sudden. Again, I do want to say this is a beautiful, well thought out plan, and if we could have some sense of binding to it, saying if you say you're going to build that, then you're going to build it. But if you want to change your mind, you can do that, and there's nothing that I can do about it. But I do want to stick with the consistency of what was recommended before. I was part of that process. And so I'm going to vote no, because I'm in support of the R2A. And it's not to appease anybody in the room, but at the same time, this is going through due process. I'm sure that I'll probably do something that somebody doesn't like. When you sit in this seat, you're always going to do something that somebody doesn't like. That's just part of sitting in the seat. And to also comment to somebody said we get paid, this is all volunteers right here. We're missing family time, basketball games with my son, just because we want to serve. And so I believe in this team at this table. We don't always agree, but at the end of the day, if we want to go grab a burger and some fries, we'll do that and not be mad at each other. But again, I just want to reiterate my decision-making, because I'm accountable to the decisions I make. I want to be consistent to what I was a part of that was decided before and not be, change my footing on what I had agreed to earlier. Because if I would, I'll have to give explanation. And so just want to be consistent.
So a vote?
Our vote's no.
Commissioner Oshenbaum?
Thank you. If the concept plan comes forward for the neighborhood and it is any significantly different than what is in this, I will vote against it in the future. I'm on this another 2 years, and I will adamantly argue against it if it's not an average of 10,000 square feet. But I vote yes.
Commissioner Pavlich?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Whitfield?
No.
Chairman Dagenhart?
Yes.
Motion has carried.
Do we need to make a second motion for planning services?
No, it was included in that motion.
Thank you.
Let's take a 5-minute break.
I'm going to go ahead and throw up the slide with the timeline on it, just so everybody in the room has those dates.
Call us back to order. Thank you. Oh, Nicole, I forgot to officially put in the record these emails that we have.
I've got them.
I know you do, I just didn't put it in the
It's
verbal
okay.
record.
I'll type it in there that Dagenhart officially said, put his officially in the record.
Make up, I
I
said
heard
that.
it, didn't y'all?
I heard
We
it.
heard it. I heard it. You've got 6, Chris, if you want to start.
All right, Ms. Rogers,
Let's
would you
do it.
please?
All right.
Okay.
But we can.
We have a quorum, so we can get started.
Yep, we got a quorum, let's roll.
If you'll increase my salary, I'll swear I said that, but if you
Yeah.
increase my salary, I'm good.
I'll double it. Ms. Rogers, thank you for being with us tonight. We have a proposal for a rezoning
All right.
at 0 North Rome Street. I didn't know there was a 0 North Rome Street.
Okay, so Coble Coffee, proposed rezone, number 1100. The applicant would like to rezone their property from R2, which is
Can you
low.
go closer to the mic so we can hear you?
Is that better?
Yes. Yes.
I got it.
Thank you.
The applicant would like to rezone their property from R2 low-density residential to B1 neighborhood commercial, neighborhood business. The site is located on North Roan, just north of its intersection with Woodbriar, and it is right across the street from, I always get it wrong, Indian Trail Middle School. Just a real quick look at all of the annexations that have happened recently, just so you can, not recently, this is all from the 80s, right? 80s and 90s? Yeah. So along Roan in the 80s and 90s, there was a boom of annexations. And this site itself was annexed in 1986 as part of a Richardson annexation. And soon after, Roan was improved to its current state of 5 lanes with a sidewalk on one side and an 8-foot multi-use trail on the other side. And once that happened, a lot of rezone applications came in. Not unlike this one. The concept plan shows a small building, the driveway, and all of the zoning ordinance requirements for landscaping, buffer. It shows that they're going to consider the stormwater facility and whatever it is that Tennessee Department of Transportation is going to require as far as getting access. Because they'll have to put in a new curb cut and they may have to put in a deceleration lane, a stacking lane. It's whatever the state is going to tell them that they have to add. A little bit about the B1 district. It is the lowest intensity of all commercial districts. It's intended to provide limited and convenient services for the people in a nearby neighborhood. It's not to cause adverse impacts on residential character and scale and character with adjacent residential. So it is a district that is intended to be put among residential uses. On the future land use map, the site is shown as residential. And this is not a residential proposal. But if you look at this map, the current zoning and proposed future uses, you can see that the site is physically separated from the neighborhood behind it by access. So it doesn't have any roads shared with the neighborhood roads. And it's functionally more a part of that commercial area right up the street than it is of the neighborhood because of that disconnection with streets. Additionally, you can see the approximate, that is not very accurate. It was the best I could come up with for showing where the setbacks would be and how a comparably sized house would fit on that lot. And the lot is very narrow. It's around 100 feet deep, and it's not deep enough to put a comparably sized home and a comfortable setback from the road. The city has a number of policies that support the commercial development, including encouraging infill, finding land that's suitable and appropriate for commercial use, and promoting the growth of retail. And we also want to recruit new business. We had a neighborhood meeting on November 14th, and 6 neighbors showed up with concerns ranging from property value to traffic and vehicle noise. And staff recommends approval.
During the neighborhood meeting, were all those concerns addressed? And were they satisfied with those?
I do not believe
comments?
that they were.
Okay, can we
So-
know a little bit more about that?
Let me go to my list, sorry. Okay. So with regards to property value, I don't know that we can speak to that. I think that's, it's not really a land use issue.
Right.
Regarding traffic, because the project would be a drive-through sort of business, the intent is for it to catch people that are already on that road. It's not.
Yeah, it won't affect the neighborhood, right?
No, there's no road connecting with the neighborhood roads. So it's disconnected.
Okay.
They would have access from Roan. So it would be to catch the cars driving down Roan. There was a concern about school safety. There's a school zone that is in that area.
It's in this school zone.
Yeah, it's it's right across the street from the school, so it is right in the middle of that school zone. But I'm not sure how pulling over into a driveway on the other side of the street. So I'm not really 100% sure that I understand that issue fully, but I don't foresee it being an issue in real life, like in operation. There was a question about the driveway location and site distance, and I think that has to do with the grading, but there isn't a grading plan, so there's no way to make that determination, except that the Tennessee Department of Transportation has to approve the location and placement and geometry of that driveway. So I think that will be covered. There was another question about interference with overhead utilities, because there's some utility poles, but all of that would have to be addressed. Like, they can't just cut down the utility pole. And vehicle noise, the existing vehicle noise of the road isn't anything that this project would have any additional impact on, so I also don't see that this project would be responsible for the existing condition of that road. And the last comment that I noted was about grading and drainage. One of the neighbors noted that they had like an existing drainage problem, but this site would be responsible for managing its drainage, right? The grading on this site would have to meet its requirements.
So
And
do
an
they have to put up
existing
a retaining-
problem.
Do they have to put up a retaining pond for the
Yeah,
drainage?
they will have to detain the, how do we word that?
Retention ponds?
They'll have to have stormwater. It's a requirement, so they'll have to treat the water, so they'll have to have some stormwater treatment.
Where is this?
They'll have to have some kind of stormwater treatment.
Okay.
On there. They can't exceed the amount of water that flows off the site now, so they have to retain it back so that it maintains the same discharge rate. And we would not let them discharge onto a neighbor. It has to be contained wholly on the site. And I'm going to interject one other thing. That I overlooked it earlier when we were reviewing this thing, is the decel lane has to be in front of their property, so their concept plan is probably going to have to be mirrored, or the entrance is probably going to have to be shifted over what it's shown on here, just to fit the decel,
To
so
allow
you
a
may have
decel
to
lane.
put that in your wording.
Okay.
So does that affect the site, was that for a site distance purpose?
If you're going to put a decel lane in front of you can't put it in front of somebody else's property. So it has to be on your property,
Can-
in front of your property.
Can you go back to that site plan for a minute? Let me look at that.
It would be very easy just to simply mirror the image.
Right.
Yeah.
And it would work out fine. There's no real problem. I don't see it as a problem for them.
Okay,
And
thank you.
just to confirm, Ms. Rogers, this plan is non-binding, is that correct?
No, this concept plan, they have to be substantially in line with it when they come in.
Okay.
So if it was.
It's
if-
binding.
Yeah,
It is
if they came in and wanted to put in a 12-space parking lot and 3,000 square foot convenience center, they would have to get a concept plan amendment.
Thank you.
Can you describe the parking requirement for this B1?
So the parking requirement is based on the use proposal, and in this case, we would have one space per employee that would be on site, plus one ADA space,
Okay, and how many employees do they think they might have?
2. So 3
So
spaces.
3 spaces, okay. All right, thank you very much. Questions for staff? Further questions for staff? Sorry. All right, I'm going to open the floor for public comment. Is anybody here to speak to the question? Please come forward, state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes, please.
I am Ted Bowery, and I live at 4,000 Navajo Drive, and I own the property that meets this on the whole back side of it, the west side. I don't think this drawing is to scale, is it not?
It is not.
Because it will take about the whole width of the thing to put in a lane to go around the building and a lane for people that start and go on around that way. We have a number of concerns. One is a decrease in property value. This particular lot connects both Boone Trail and Shadowwood subdivisions. It borders on both. And we feel that if we put a commercial item in there, and both of those subdivisions have a lot of people in them, and none of them have any commercial touch on anything else. So this would be a first. Second is traffic problems. Has anyone been out there in the morning when they come through there already at school? They have 2 and sometimes 3 policemen out there trying to control it. And this lot would have to have some access or egress right in the middle of it. So that's a major, major problem. And in my case, I'm interested about the noise problem and the decrease in home security when you put 100 cars going in there, and they will go actually closer to that back line, almost to it. And there's lighting problems now already. At night, you've got all these lights from the ballpark. If that entrance into there goes up the slope at any at all, they'll shine in your back windows, because it's only 40 feet to the dividing line there. The next one is trash problems. I've never seen a drive-through yet that didn't collect trash thrown out. And we already have trash problems just going down the road. And the last one is the drainage problem, which they've partially addressed here. There's parts of 3 different lots and the houses that are drained through there. And there's a big tile goes under the 5 lanes of highway. So I have not seen a plan to scale to see what that'd actually take. But it's very narrow. It looks like it's a lot wider than it is, but you've got power lines across it next to the road. and you've got a sidewalk there and a bank. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Mallory. Anyone else? Please come forward.
Arthur Willett. I live at 4001 Navajo Drive. So my concerns, just like Mr. Mallory, are very similar. I was at the meeting earlier also. Through the designation of this, it says no adverse effect on existing properties. I ask you, who would want a commercial building being built right beside your residential single-family housing? There is no way that anybody can say that that would be an increase, so it's got to be a decrease. It's not going to be neutral to that. I agree that we look at growth for the city. However, north of here, there's lots that are available. In fact, just north of there on the same side of the road, there's a much larger lot that's available that I think would be more appropriate. It would not be in the school zone. There's officers out there because of the high volume of traffic, the school buses and the kids walking on the streets. So I don't know why we would want to put a commercial building exiting and entering into a school zone. That just doesn't make sense to me, personally. The deceleration lane that's talked about, I don't know how often you travel by any other of our coffee shops here in Johnson City, but quite honestly, when you go by Starbucks on Roan Street, their driveway is very long. Often they're backed up and wrapping around the building and down the road, being a traffic obstruction. This right here, I assume that we're going to be looking at this being a popular place. I assume that anybody would start a business, you're not looking for it to be slow traffic. You're wanting as much traffic as possible. I think the traffic congestion out on Roan Street, there is going to be traffic congestion out there with the entrance and the exit. The speeds generally are probably in the 40s to 45 miles an hour. During school days with the lights, it's 25. But then again, the officers are out there with the whole purpose to provide safety for the kids to get in and out of the school district. All I'm saying is I'd like for you to take that into consideration, and the whole idea of that it is going to be a decrease in my value in Mr. Mowry Shadowwood development that will negatively affect my value. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Willett. Anyone else to speak to the question? Is the property proposer here? Is the developer here? Do you have any comments or anything you'd like to? Please come forward and state your name and address.
My name's Andrea Coble. I live at 4103 Sioux Drive. I actually live in the same neighborhood as the first gentleman that spoke. So,
yes, ma'am.
I really would love to work with my neighbors on setting up a buffer. I mean, right now they're looking at Roan Road, which is very busy. I felt like we could do, a fence and nice shrubs. So,
could you pull the mic?
yeah, so they're not, seeing all that traffic that's going by right now. I really just want to have a locally owned business where I'm supporting local coffee roasters. I'm also going to be selling flower bouquets. I used to have a flower farm, and I would like to continue that as well. So with selling my flowers, and it's going to be quiet. I mean, I'm not going to have, it's not like an indoor coffee shop. It's just a drive-through. So it's in and out, one driveway in and out. I'd love to I would love to work with everyone on making it, peaceful and lovely and beautiful. I want to put in lots of landscaping and gardens around it. And sorry. I'm not very good at public speaking.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes. Do
you have a sense of how wide the drive-through will be, the driving portion around the
I know
building?
that when talking with the fire safety people at the city, there's a certain width that we have to put in, they need to get a fire truck in there. And I know that she said that wouldn't be an issue. I think I did try to actually do this to scale. It's like 3 feet per square. So the building is 12 by 24. Obviously, my hand drawing of the drive around it is probably going to be a little bit different, but the building is to scale. So I guess it just depends on what the Department of Transportation needs coming in, and then the codes and stuff that I need to follow.
Have you got a architect who's working on this or a contractor yet?
Not yet, just because, I mean, we're still in the beginning processes. I just closed on the property a couple weeks ago, and then obviously I didn't want to move forward with, you know, the civil engineering and the architects and all that until we can get the rezoning approved.
And I think staff can weigh in on this, but I think she'll have to have a border, is that correct?
Have to have a
Buffer, excuse me.
Yeah, the zoning code requires a buffer, and that's
Yeah.
where the fence and shrubs that she just mentioned comes in. So
Yeah.
she's aware of the requirements that the zoning code has.
Type 2 buffer?
Ooh, I'm not.
Mr. Ryder?
Yeah, it's medium to low.
The municipal
about
Bible,
that.
please.
Well, while we're looking at that, is there any way to pull up a satellite image or an image that we have that would show if there's any commercial on that side of the street going down to Carroll Creek?
Isn't there a CVS at the
Yeah,
corner?
going down to Carroll Creek, anything between that point?
No, it's just.
No.
piece of vacant property all the way down.
So there's no commercial on that strip? Okay.
No.
Because I was just thinking about the block system. I know there's several blocks on that side.
There's no homes, it's just vacant property.
Right.
So type 1 buffer.
Type 1 buffer.
So, yeah, B1 to B1 small scale business to single family. So type 1 buffer, so you're either 10 feet wide with a no build area or 15 feet wide, and then you have the option of either a fence and 6 evergreen trees every 100 feet for the type 1.
Will, the mic can't hear you.
All right, 2 types of buffer options in the type 1. Pick either one that they want. Or one's a 15-foot wide no build area, which is 10 type 1 evergreen trees if they go with the 15-foot wide buffer. If they go with the 10-foot wide buffer, it's a 6-foot high wood fence or masonry wall with 6 type 1 evergreen trees every 100 feet. So pretty typical for this size of business to abut a single-family neighborhood. And I also like to mention, as far as lighting, when it comes time for the civil set, they'll have to provide a photometric plan if they have exterior lighting, which has a very low tolerance of foot candles trespassing across the property line. And any shaded area or any exterior lighting on the building itself would be shaded to prevent it from shining in the neighbors' apartments. As far as the ball fields across the field, those are exempt from city code, city property.
Thank you. Ms. Coble, another question. How did you, if I could ask you, how did you settle on this piece of property?
Well, I found it because I live right in the neighborhood
Okay.
that's next to it, and I just decided that there's nothing I've noticed along that road, coffee drive-through wise. I came from Washington State.
Oh, they're everywhere.
And there's drive-throughs everywhere, and I'm like, where's all the coffee drive-throughs? And, you know, Starbucks is all the way on the other end of Roan, and I just thought, you know, I used to be a barista for a really long time in my 20s, and I really enjoyed it, and I was like, maybe this would be something that we could use in this area. And I've met a lot of people in the community, and they're all like, that would be amazing. I can pick coffee up when I'm taking my kid to school, on my way to church, or just, you know.
Did I hear you say that you're also going to do flowers there?
Yes. So
How's that going to work?
So I am going to set up, I have a big backyard, and I'm a dahlia grower, so I'll bring bouquets in and set them up on my little stand in the drive-through. I've done it in drive-throughs before in Washington, so people seem to love that. They come through, grab a bouquet of flowers, get their coffee, and then they're out, so.
And have you worked with your neighbors? Have you spoken to them at the community meeting, neighborhood meeting?
When, the last meeting?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I was here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Coble.
Yes, thank you.
Anyone else here to speak to the question? Seeing nobody raise their hand, I'm going to close the public comment. Any other questions for staff? I had one question. Could you conceive, this is zoned R2 now? Considering the front setbacks and the back setbacks, can you imagine it's possible to even put a property there that would conform as a residence?
So I did have that one image, and I'm gonna apologize for the way the one I'm about to show you looks, but I'll show you, I could have had GIS make it, but I didn't know. What I did was, I looked at the nearest houses in the vicinity of the site, and I got their square footages, and I took a mean, and then I found one that was even a little bit smaller than the mean, because the mean came out to 1970 square feet for those 15 surrounding houses. And the one right behind is 1829, so it's a little bit smaller than the mean is for the house. And that's how it would fit on that lot. So, I wouldn't want to live in that house.
Would it be permissible?
Yes, you could absolutely put a house right there on that lot, meeting all the setbacks, and you would be able to put in a driveway that could back out onto the street.
And would that house there meet, would you be able to make that size house, that 1870,
You could put that exact house right there.
and it would meet the setbacks?
It would meet the setbacks.
And you could put in, yeah, the front yard is 25, hold on, I might have a slide, there you go. The front yard is 25 feet from the edge of pavement, or from the edge of the right-of-way, sorry.
From the right-of-way.
25 feet.
They'd have to drive a tank to back out on that road.
Yeah, and they could put in a front-in, back-out driveway if they wanted to for a house.
They'd be crazy.
Yeah, that's,
They would be
I
crazy.
think I could agree with that.
Well, this is part of why I didn't think it was appropriate for residential use, because it would be real hard to deal
I think
with.
that's illustrative.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, other questions or discussion?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I'd entertain a motion for the rezoning of 1100 at 0 North Roan Street to approve from R2 to B1.
Second.
All right, we've got a motion and a second to rezone from R2 to B1 at 0 North Roan Street. Any discussion or questions? Please call the roll.
Commissioner Aldridge?
Yes.
Commissioner Bailey?
Can I ask you to pause before we vote?
Oh, yes.
So, as Wallace said, they may have to mirror image.
Oh, yes, yeah, yep.
Can we-
Yeah.
The motion needs to be amended, please, Mr. Ocean.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Oceanberg.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve rezoning 1100 on 0 North Roan Street with a plan of
Allow for
mirror
driveway
image
shift, yeah.
for the deceleration lane from R2 to B1.
All right, so seconder is agreeable to that?
Yes.
Okay, can we start over with the roll call?
Yes, sir. Commissioner Aldridge?
Yes.
Commissioner Bailey?
Yes.
Commissioner Lockmiller?
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy?
Yes.
Commissioner Oceanbine?
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich?
I love the concept. I think it would be more appropriate on the other side of the street where there is commercial already. Love the concept, but I'm gonna say no.
Vice Chairman Whitfield?
Yes.
Chairman Dagenhart?
Yes.
Motion has carried.
Thank you very much,
Good
Ms.
luck.
Rogers. Thank you. All right, now we have a Ms. Poore up for another rezoning at 604 Leisure Lane. If your voice can hold out.
I tried not to talk today, and if you guys know me, that's a really hard feat.
I think she'll, if she put a coffee shop there, there's so much traffic that comes from that area.
Hallelujah.
But I did try to save my voice for you guys tonight. Don't know how well it worked. All right, commissioners, in front of you, I have rezoning 1101, 604 Leisure Lane. The rezoning request is for approximately 0.9 acres from I-1 light industrial to B4 planned arterial business district. So if you'll see right now on the screen, the actual lot is split zoned right now. So this is the lot in question. The industrial is a split zone piece of this. They already have a sliver of this that's commercially zoned, and then they currently have a replat going through to actually combine these two lots. So the development proposal, again, this is the original lot line, and they're trying to combine these lots. The request is to build a car wash, and a car wash is actually an incompatible use with the industrial district. So they're requesting a rezoning to B4 so that, first of all, the zoning line gets cleaned up and the entire piece of property is zoned commercially. And that would actually alleviate the split zoning, and it would allow for them to construct their car wash. Currently, it says it's being used for commercial. The site's actually vacant. And the future land use map does propose that it go commercial, especially with the two lots being combined. It does make sense for this one piece of property to be zoned the same throughout. There was a neighborhood meeting. There was one person in attendance. She really just had questions about what exactly the development was going to be. And then staff is recommending approval. And I can answer any questions that you guys have.
Any questions for staff? It's amazing how questions dry up after 8 o'clock.
The applicant's also here if you guys have any questions for them.
I have a question for the applicant.
All right, I'm going to open the floor for public comment. If you have a public comment, please come forward. I'm going to guess you might be the applicant. Come on up. Your name and address, please.
Alex Perry, 1141 Dixon Road. I'm the engineering design manager for Tidal Wave Auto Spa. Can answer any questions.
Ms. Perry, yeah, I just have one question. I went out to see this site as well, and I'm just trying to understand why you guys are trying to build a car wash next to two other car washes. What is it about this neighborhood or this intersection that has so many dirty cars?
It's probably availability in the market just for commercial properties, but Tidal Wave Auto Spa is a little different than the other car washes in the market, so it's not really like saying if you're going to Outback versus Burger King, you know, we provide a different product, so.
Are you guys Burger King or Outback?
We're Outback.
You're the Outback, okay.
Yep, we're the highest end express car wash in the industry, and we produce more expensive product, but a much nicer product for our customers.
How much is a car wash at the Outback?
Ours can be, you know, over $30 for one wash.
For one car wash?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the West Side Car Wash?
I'm not familiar with that particular car wash.
It's across the street.
Yeah, I
And
think
there's
it's
the Ultimate Shine Car Wash,
I
which
think
is
it's an
also across the street.
Express, maybe Flex. I'm not the marketing guy, I'm the engineer. so.
Okay, all right, that's fair, Mr.
Sorry.
Perry.
Any other questions?
You just build it, you don't
Any other-
decide where they go.
Any other things you want to share with us?
That's it.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
I do need to add one thing here, and it's nothing that Peyton left out, because I've got a site plan or a commercial plan to review this car wash. The plan's to build the car wash whether this gets rezoned or not, because they can build the car wash now on the property that's already zoned B4. You're just, by cleaning up the split zone, we're talking about getting a few extra vacuum stalls. So whether or not it gets rezoned, they can build the car wash, but it certainly would make the zoning map look a lot better to clean it up, and they could have a couple more vacuum stalls on it. But I just wanted to make you aware, to be transparent, that that plan's already under review and could be approved as it is.
That's helpful, Mr. Ryder, thank you. Any
Mr.
other-
Ryder, okay. Never mind.
Any other questions for staff? Any other discussion amongst us? Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to approve rezoning 1101 at 604 Leaker Lane from light industrial to planned arterial business.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second for the rezoning.
Second.
Any other questions or conversation before we vote?
You can do any motion you want.
All right, Nicole, would you please call the roll? Ms. Lawrence?
Commissioner Aldridge?
Yes.
Commissioner Bailey?
Yes.
Commissioner Lockmiller?
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy?
Yes.
Commissioner Oceanbine?
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Whitfield?
Yes.
And Chairman Dagenhart?
Yes.
Motion has carried.
All right, Ms. Hodges, last on the agenda is a text amendment on open space.
And there are people who stayed. Okay, so I gave you guys some homework, and then I sent around a new ordinance. So,
Correct. Agreed.
And what I'd like to go through is kind of what came out of the conversations that we've had with the community and as well as other departments. So we know the purpose and intent of open space. We kind of talked about that last time. And this would apply to new residential developments that exceed 25 dwelling units and that are greater than 10 acres in size, and then non-residential multi-building sites that are greater than 15 acres. So, and, oh yes, with the 10 acres, it's public, or if new streets are needed. So with single-family open space, one of the ways we had started was thinking about open space when it came to just straight percentages and just kind of going up from density all the way up. But as we started thinking it out and putting it into practice, that doesn't necessarily make sense. So we brought it out into three categories, 3.5, I'm going to say. So with single family, those would go from 3 to 11 units per acre, and they have corresponding percentages. Those percentages would start where the RP districts already start and then move up in 5% increments. I believe there's a comment that maybe increasing those, and that can be something that you guys can discuss as well. We pulled out multifamily because to have a high-density residential development, oftentimes that is going to be close into town. And so it's not going to be an expansive piece of land. So to say that you need 25% to reserve 25% on an already tight site where we actually want density, because people can walk and we have infrastructure there for it, then we kind of thought about something different. So what we proposed was that it would be 20%, and that of which 40% of that 20 would be something that is developed for amenities, such as things that they're likely already doing with clubhouses, dog walks, that kind of thing. For non-residential open space, we looked at this from a perspective of, again, this will be in areas where, a lot of times this might be in areas where you've got maybe some mixtures of uses or uses close by. So we took something from a different ordinance where we tied it to the gross square footage without just saying it's a specific percent. It would be of how large the development is. And then say we do have a mixed use development. We looked at that the residential, wherever the residential area, that would have to be met, and then the commercial would have to be met. So but it's the greatest of the residential. So if you had single family, multifamily, and commercial, whatever is the greatest of those densities would need to be met in that particular area. There are some exceptions to open space. If you've got relatively larger lots of over like near an acre, any industrial uses or agricultural uses, and B2 and B3 zoning. So downtown would be exempt from open space. And then this is where we've had a lot of discussion about what is applicable. And I'm not going to read through all of these, but I have slides for all of these. So as we have discussion, we can go back through them. But we're starting with, when thinking through a conservation to an urban spectrum, we started that direction. So if you have places that you want to conserve, number one and 2 is what would qualify. If you have easements, which this became there are a lot of discussion around this. Easements right now in anything but RP, if it requires open space, they all count. And we've heard from the Planning Commission that isn't necessarily completely feasible. So maybe counting them as half, and then they can count for 100% when they are improved in some nature. So that because it's a lot of times through the development, the preliminary plat process, that's one of the comments that staff has heard and taken to heart. The other thing is to add, currently you can't use stormwater retention areas, so to kind of add that into an open space requirement, but you have to be able to basically improve it somehow. So like if you've got a retention area, and you want to count the slopes, and your slopes need to be something that you could walk on. And then if you wanted to put a clubhouse or anything like that, obviously that would count. And lastly, in some of your mixed-use areas, if you have started to do like some hardscape, you can see those all around downtown, of where we have these little like pocket areas for people to congregate. One thing that has probably still like a little point that we need to work out with legal is the ownership of open space. So it's basically, this basically says that there are different ways to own open space, but that it also needs to be maintained for perpetuity and recorded so that we know where it is. One of the issues that has come up from water and sewer is that we also in the future need to be able to have spaces to put lift stations or whatever we need, and they want to make sure that that doesn't impede it. So we're going to work that through legal a little bit more. We allow for reducing open space. So if you are adjacent to a park, there is an open space reduction. If you connect to, let's see, if you connect to a park or within quarter mile, you can reduce your open space. If there is a internal greenway that if you do an internal greenway and you're connecting into the sidewalk system, we're allowing a reduction. And then also if you connect or if you provide a trail around a stream, we're allowing a reduction. If you dedicate land to the greenway, this was something that came up a lot during our legislative and land use conversations, is how will this plan kind of morph into and help out the greenway plan? And this is the way it would do that, is to say, if you're going to dedicate, you can reduce in any way.
Is it 1 for 1?
This one is, it depends on how much, a little bit. So if it is over 10% of the site, it shall be satisfied. If it's less than 10%, then you still would need to provide. So if you only have like a little sliver, then you would still need to provide some. But if you're developing property along a creek and the greenway is all in the creek, that should be able to count if you dedicate it. And it's just saying dedication. It's not necessarily saying improvement, because we may have different specifications that we want to build greenways to than what a developer would build a greenway to.
Thanks for the clarification.
But the land is really important. Getting the land is really important. And then also we have some definitions of open space. So if we want to discuss those, we have those there. So I actually just want to be able to open this up for discussion between you guys. Open up, if you guys would like to open a public hearing, then open the public hearing for this. And then my recommendation is likely that we continue discussion, because I did add a lot of new things, and there might be some more discussion to be had.
Okay, thank you.
So you're not asking for an adoption tonight?
I'm not asking for it. I would never want to rush anything of this nature. This is a really big piece of legislation. And I think that it does deserve all the thought that all of you have put into this over the course of a year. So if it takes an extra month, then that's okay.
I know from mayor's standpoint, we've deliberated this a lot, and we have deliberated. Has staff had any input from the development community?
Yes. And those comments, so inside this, we have talked to, I've talked to Corey, can't think of his, Corey Black.
You don't need names,
Black, okay.
but you.
Yeah, but yes, I've talked to the development community.
And are they receptive?
There's someone
Pushback?
here let's just say, Mr. Dutton's here to talk about it, so.
I think it's fair to say that they have some significant heartburn about some of the choices.
Mhm.
And I think that's fair. So.
It's not open for public comment, is it?
It's going to be just a moment.
Well, thanks for all your hard work. Commend you and staff on putting that together. It looks, from a planning standpoint, it looks very nice.
Thank you. I'd like to open the floor for public comment. Is anyone here to speak to the question?
Not everybody at once.
Yeah.
I have a funny accent, so I think Shane's going to put this on.
There's a funny accent.
Shane, would you please state your name and address?
Yes, sir. Shane Abraham, 200 Headview Drive. No, I appreciate all the hard work that the ladies put together here. I think they've done a nice job, and I understand. I think to a small extent, kind of coming in here late in the game of understanding what the intent is behind this, but I think it's always nice to have open space. And really, my comment is brief and really just from a conceptual standpoint, from a multifamily perspective. We just took this information and there's some challenges we have in there with our model, but of course, we kind of tested what our recent developments would look like with this language, and it would be a pretty significant reduction in density. So if you look at the development we just did behind the mall, that project probably becomes unjustifiable before us when you look, and Todd can probably speak to better detail in this, of what open space would actually have counted through this criteria. So we just want to be careful that if we're, depending on where the focus of this is really aimed, and I think I understand of where the focus of it is aimed, and what I'm scared is that we might be going about it utilizing, we're painting with a really wide brush, and it can have a lot of collateral damage if we're not careful. So with us as a workforce housing developer, there's no doubt this drives housing cost. Our rents will be higher when we develop a community. And that doesn't mean aspects of this shouldn't be integrated. And so I'm not saying that I'm adamantly opposed, but where it fits certain product and certain applications, because of the way this will play through the zoning code, it can have a ripple effect. And so I know we're not looking for a vote tonight, and I don't know that we need to work into a lot of details, and those are some of the same comments I think when we talked about them earlier. So we're going to have reservations for segments of this for sure.
Do you care to just address some of those concerns of how it would impact your developments?
Sure.
And where there could maybe be some compromise?
Yes, yes. So, typically we build a type of product that is not very vertical. It blends very well with neighboring 1- and 2-story single-family residential neighborhoods. But because of that, if you have an R4 zoning that's getting X amount of units per acre, we're never going to be able to attain that with our typical 1- and 2-story type of product. You're just not going to have enough land. And we amenitize our communities very well. I mean, we put in very nice clubhouses, bark parks, fitness centers, swimming pools. I mean, we try to loan them out, outdoor pavilions. So we're putting a lot of features in there. And the challenge is when we develop a typical community, we're 50 to 60% 1-bedrooms. We're 30 to 35% 2s and 10 to 15 3s. If you go behind, if you go behind the mall at the Mockingbird Project and watch the school bus pick up kids, they might have 8 or 10 kids get picked up. We're just not a big driver of school children. And the sidewalk that takes people to Roan Street, you'll still see people cutting through there on the neighborhood nonstop. And I'll tell you, walking trails and wide sidewalks are a big user. But we're not that type of a community that's going to drive that kind of exterior, outside type recreation. You just don't see it. It's not like we have to manage kids out in parking lots playing kickball. It's just not that type of community. But I can see where you have a very dense development, like some of the ones that we're getting annexed here tonight, and you've got really small lots, and those are 3 and 4 and sometimes 5-bedroom homes on very small lots. That's going to be a big driver of children, a lot of outdoor recreation. And so I can see where components of this come into play. That's where I want to be careful that if we're going about this with such a wide swath, we get pulled into something with our type product. And honestly, it probably stops the show for us in certain applications where we can't, we're just not going to get the density. And you couple that with today's interest rates and building materials and whatnot, project behind the mall probably doesn't happen, would be my guess, if this plays into that. So there's repercussions, and that's just kind of the part I wanted to express anyway, that there's some potential challenges with that.
Mr. Abraham, even with, you said you put in pavilions and pools and outdoor areas, recreational areas, even with all of that, even just having 20% of your space having open space, that's still too much?
Correct me if I'm wrong. I think in the community that we just finished behind the mall about a year ago, we would get about half that.
You had 10% open space?
That's correct. That's with the qualifiers the way that I think we can add them in, and some things might have been changed with that, but I believe we'd be about 10% with that. And that's a very amenitized community from our perspective, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Brent?
What's the name of that? Sorry, one last thing, Commissioner Oceanbine. What's the name of that development? I just want to go see it.
Universal at Mockingbird Lane.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
I do have a
Sorry.
follow-up question. So do you think that 10% should be more specific and should be more targeted on how that should be used? Instead of making it more space, 20%, and et cetera?
Yeah, I think, and again, I'm not a planner, but depending on what the focus of where this agenda is coming from, if it was driven by city council or, internal management or planning commission if there was a certain area that this was really trying to be applied to, maybe there's a different vehicle. If it was really meant to apply to single-family neighborhoods because there's certain neighborhoods we're seeing that we don't like the characteristics, maybe we can get there through subdivision regs and not have to have this overall type of feature that pulls so many different type of products in it. Outside of that, maybe there's different values that could be created that have more value for some of these features, so you can get there easier to make this happen, because it's just going to drive vertical construction. Vertical construction is more expensive than the way we do things. I mean, we're not a government subsidized developer, but we do consider ourselves a workforce housing developer, and we're typically the price leader in new construction apartment communities. It's just kind of the segment we try to be in. And I will just tell you point blank, there's no arguing this will make our product more expensive in Johnson City.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys.
Todd, I think you're going to come forward, aren't you?
Good evening, Todd Wood, 1804 Galen Drive, Johnson City. Most of you know who I am, but the ones that don't, I'm a civil engineer. I design sites that you review here, from subdivisions, multifamily. I also do consulting work for other local governments, creating regulations, interpreting regulations. So I would use these in most of the projects I design in Johnson City. First, I'd like to thank the staff, because they invited us in to talk about this, which was great. It wasn't done in a vacuum, so it was really nice to have that opportunity. One thing Shane was saying, you asked about the open space, would it hurt them? Depending on the definitions, and each site's a little bit different, sometimes you could get 20% if you had a floodplain on the property that you couldn't use. The Mockingbird, pretty much the open space there are all the drainage ways. And there's not much else. But I've looked at a couple of their projects where they put in the clubhouse, parking lot for the clubhouse, pool, playground, dog park. And when you start looking at, I think there was one that was 16 acres, and you looked at the open space, you had the 20%. But if you apply the 40% of the 20%, that's 8% of the site, has to go to those more active areas. So what they do, they don't build a clubhouse that's huge, that's overbuilt for that development. It only adds up to 3 to 4% of the site. And then you got to think about, if you have a piece of property that has a lot of unbuildable area, like floodplains that maybe add up to even a greater area. So now you can't build on that, but that 8% is still based on the whole site. So your playground and active areas start like this, that work for that community, and you maybe add another 100 units to it because the site's bigger. You're not going, this much bigger. You're going from maybe 3% to 5%, but that requirement is going to take that area that you need and probably triple the size that they have to provide, just because that's what the regulation says. The intent's great, provide recreation opportunities for people. My recommendation, and we did this a little bit in the meeting, is you take the regulations as written, or what you want, look at either old plans and see how it would fit, or take a whole new raw land piece of property and design it. based on those and see what you get. It may be fine. I think there's going to be some issues. You know, it's going to get costly, but these percentages, especially when you start getting in 20%, 25%, and that's more single family, that's going to be tough in places. The other thing is to really think about every single word that is in the regulations, because as a designer, I'm going to read it and go, all right, yeah, I can do that, but well, wait a minute, there's a loophole right there. They don't realize it's in that regulation. You mentioned subdivisions, where it applies, 25, units or more, 10 acres, and projects, I think we're streets, public and private in subdivisions. So what Shane was talking about is not a subdivision. So as written, somebody's going to read it that it only applies if you're going through the subdivision process. So think about that. Also, a couple of the other words like retention pond. That's a permanent pool of water. So you want to change that to something like stormwater facilities. A wet pond can be great. You can walk around it. Even if it's fenced, it can still look nice. So just because it's fenced, I don't think should be excluded from that. And just there's other things. So I would offer this. If staff wants to do it again, if the planning commission wants to have a workshop, I can come in with my computer with AutoCAD, we'll pull up drawings, and we'll start calculating stuff. We can see if it's really getting what you want, and it might be.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. That's a very generous offer.
Jamie's got some.
So from a civil engineering standpoint, and I know you're into conservation as well, is there an industry standard for said developments that, we try to work towards as engineers?
I don't think there's any set standard. I will say in Jonesboro, they have a zone plan residential district. That is 20% in that. What is counted towards open space is a little more flexible than the definition here. If this was applied to those, it would probably push it into more of a 25-30% range would have to be excluded from development. It's not to say that it couldn't still work, but it would make it more difficult.
I don't want to speak for the whole commission, but for me personally, when we look at open space, connectivity is very important, pedestrian connectivity. So whether that's however we design that, I think that's going to be important as we move forward, as we look at infill, and especially some of the developments Mr. Abraham does in his group, because eventually that pedestrian traffic is going to be more of a necessity than an amenity.
And I think quality over quantity of the open space utilization is what's most important to me. And I want to make sure that's highlighted when we draw these plans up, is that, if someone has 30% open space, but it's not usable as a community member living in that community, that doesn't matter to me. But if there's 10% that is usable, that would be huge. But you bring up an interesting point about, well, if there's only 50% of the property is usable to build on, why are we responsible to 100% of the lot for the percentage of the open space? And I think that's a very good point, and I think we should look at that.
I think with the multifamily, I don't know if there's a way to do this, to keep it as flexible as possible and not put a number to it. Or look at developments, go to an aerial photograph and start calculating what those areas are, or just, you have to provide something. Keep it a little open-ended. I know that's tough for staff, that's tough for you to do that, but maybe you do that until you figure out exactly what it is that you're looking for. Because the way written, it just doesn't work for multifamily. not speaking about single, but just multifamily, it doesn't work. Also, and we mentioned this in the meeting with staff. Anybody that designs stuff or sends stuff in, they're going to use everything to their advantage for their client typically. So, you know, if you've got stream and you've got the easement that you get, I think 10%, if it's at least 10% of the open space requirement, the easement for the dedication or the easement for that future trail, for instance. If that's at least 10%, then that takes care of, well, how wide's that easement? So I might come in and say, well, I'm going to make, if it's an area where we really can't build, maybe we'll give you an easement that's 50 feet wide. And now we've played the game to get to that 10%, but it hasn't gotten anything else. So it's just little things like that. I think what Whitney has is great. It just needs to be tweaked and just carefully worded to make sure you get what you want, and that you don't stop development or slow down development, because this has the potential of doing that.
Thank you for your input.
Appreciate it.
Thank
And
you.
we are listening. So.
Anyone else here to speak to the question?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I have a funny accent, but I guess I'm going to chat to you anyway. I have a propensity sometimes to talk quickly, so do slow me down if I go that way. Just to reiterate what Shane and Todd have both said, we really do appreciate staff was proactive. They did reach out to us and ask us and solicit input from us, for which we're very grateful. And we're enjoying the conversation, which we agree with staff should continue. Not to repeat anything that either Shane or Todd has said, but just another couple of concepts for you to ponder as you're reviewing the draft of the open space ordinance. The first is that the ordinance is bringing in what could typically be considered as three separate concepts. Open space in and of itself, which is just that, it is open space irrespective of use. The ordinance also discusses and brings in conservancy as a concept and kind of confuses the two a little bit. And then amenitization is also brought in as a concept. An understanding that the Commission does have and the city has certain policy objectives with respect to each of those two things. It is important to consider how that's actually going to work mechanically. So not all open space, for example, will want to be conserved, and this was the example that Whitney mentioned earlier with respect to your sanitary folks who have a concern. It's not at all uncommon that in the future, as development continues and development grows out, that you find yourself in need of placing something like a sanitary lift station, or maybe something less innocuous. It may just be transmission, SCADA facilities, or whatever it might be. But it's not at all uncommon that you have to go back through, and the city will actually want to add infrastructure. If you've conserved something and dedicated it irrevocably in perpetuity to a conservancy use, you don't have the option to do that. When we're drawing the distinction between multifamily and single family as well, it's important to consider the different ownership structures for those pieces of for those properties and how those work. When you're talking about single family subdivisions, because you're going to be selling the individual lots, the open space that you have that's left over will need to be defined in tracts, and it will need to be deeded to an HOA for the HOA to maintain. It doesn't need to be conserved, but it needs to be deeded to an HOA to maintain. And don't forget that if the HOA decided at any point in the future that they wish to come back and change that use, it would still have to go through a site plan process, so you still have control. So the conservancy process and the irrevocable open space or irrevocable preservation is somewhat redundant in that concept. The way a multifamily subdivision, or not a subdivision, the way a multifamily community works, of course, because we own everything. We own the lots, we own things, so we don't need to define those individual tracts, which is a lot of work. So again, just the unintended consequences of perhaps how we're structuring things. But thank you for your time. I hope it wasn't I didn't run over too much there. If you have any questions, I'm here for those. Otherwise, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dudley.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Any questions?
I just want to say that the irrevocability has been taken out, because we wanted to be able to have different options, but I think by, step one in the ownership of open space, it pretty much says, wherever that went, of just who can own it, because that needed to be stated, who can own it. It's the maintained in perpetuity. That is something we would want to still maintain to see, and I think that anybody would want to make sure that that is maintained, and that it's recorded. So I think it's where for water and sewer, it's that recording of what can be, if it's only for open space, or if there is something in some language that we can put, it can be used for this. But if it went to a conservancy, it would be up to that conservancy, whatever deed restrictions or anything that they placed on it. So.
Ms. Hodges, what's the next step for this process now?
Well, the next step is you guys can bring it back. You guys can discuss it right now. You guys can take it to committee. It might be late.
Yeah. I think the will to discuss maybe have left the commission.
You can send it to legislative and land use in January, and then you can continue this conversation.
We need a motion.
You do need a motion of where it needs to go, and if you you also might want to include in the motion that that a public hearing can still happen, so that there's more than one public, like that you guys can open it up to more than one public hearing.
Yeah, I'd like to suggest a motion.
Yeah.
That we remand this back to the LELU committee, Legislative and Land Use Committee, and consult with staff about planning an overview session with significant attendance by the whole commission.
Second.
Second, yeah. I'm not finished?
Third.
And that we also look at the possibility of having a dialogue with some of our community stakeholders who obviously have a lot of knowledge and experience about this topic, and work with staff to see if we can make a plan to do that.
So the Legislative and Land Use Committee is on Wednesday, the January 4th. So maybe that we just I'll ask Todd and crew.
I think we may need a planning session. maybe
Prior to that?
A small
Okay.
group planning session, but I would like to target that meeting on the 4th.
Okay, what to target
To invite.
to invite? Okay. And you want one before that?
I think.
That's gonna be
I think-
challenging.
That's gonna be
That's gonna
really
be hard, Chris,
challenging.
with the holidays.
That's true.
Some of us celebrate Christmas, Chris.
I'm a slave driver.
Santa Claus not gonna come see you.
Yeah.
I would like to do that little
Well,
working exercise that
Let's do 30 minutes
we'll
before that.
discuss, because I think that would be good.
So
just
meet
to
it,
know how
you
our
wanna
policies
do-
Can we do 4 o'clock?
Yeah, it's all open to the public anyway, either way.
Yeah, I just want us to I want us to think about what we're trying to accomplish, lay some ground rules and some plans about how we're gonna approach the question before we bring in the public and see us
Right.
look confused. I don't want that to happen. Subjective.
When you get together, it's still a public meeting, so it doesn't
That's
matter.
fine.
Okay.
Subdivision.
And then I wanted to say that, what is, it just left me. I don't guess it's
All right, I
important.
suggested a motion, so somebody's gonna have to make a motion.
I need to,
Second.
can I make a motion right now that my taxpayer money go to turn the heat on in this building?
Oh, my gosh.
I mean, I'm just saying, could somebody second, could we vote on it?
Yes.
No, please, that's out of order.
I
Wear a
froze
coat.
it into an ice cake.
Wear a coat.
I'm waiting for a motion.
Motion
I
to
second it.
send this to the 4th, the LELU committee so we can have it.
All right, we got a motion and a second. All in
Yes.
favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Done.
Let it be noted that the LELU will begin at 4
unanimous.
o'clock versus 4:30.
Okay, 4 o'clock, and we'll have an hour and a half.
We'll have an hour and a half.
Are we allowed to Zoom those?
Meeting is adjourned.
It is freezing.
You can.